Donald Trump started his illegal war with Iran for several reasons. Of course, the cover-up of the Epstein files and the fact that Israel controls his government are two obvious ones. But the fact that Donald Trump can use this opportunity to consolidate power in his authoritarian regime has not been talked about enough, and certainly needs to be in the context of the announcement made this morning that Donald Trump is declaring emergency powers under the guise of helping us recover from what he says is his illegal war that nobody needed. So Donald Trump is saying that he's going to fix an issue that he started. But really, it's a way for him to meddle further with business, with our government, and more importantly than maybe anything, make himself and his rich buddies more money. That is what Donald Trump is doing by declaring his emergency power. But it all starts with maybe some of the biggest blowback that Donald Trump has gotten on this illegal war, and that is gas prices. It is the reason Donald Trump is declaring this power, and it is where we need to start.
Donald Trump went to Kentucky today to try to convince people that he has delivered on his promise of lower prices, even though gas prices are now skyrocketing and inflation has increased because of Donald Trump's unconstitutional and illegal tariffs. The Trump staff actually put a sign on the stage with the words "lower prices" in front of an audience full of people who paid higher prices for gas to get to that event today. MS Now's Will McDuffie spoke to voters in Pennsylvania about the price of gas.
Around about 45, 50 cents more today than last week, almost 5 days ago.
That's a lot in a short amount of time.
Yeah, that's a lot. If it keeps going, it's not going to be good.
As for right now, I'm less than a quarter of a tank, so it's between getting gas or going to the grocery store to get food for my kids.
I actually stopped driving because gas prices have gone so high. I can't even afford to really go to work, so I've resulted in taking the bus now.
One person explained that they had less than a quarter of a tank and had to choose between getting gas or going to the grocery store to get food for their kids. Another said they actually stopped driving because gas prices have gone so high they can't afford to go to work anymore and have had to start taking the bus. Donald Trump has exploded the price of gas for no reason at all. He says it's because he needs to remove evil people who kill civilians. But if that's the case, then everyone in his administration should resign because he refuses to acknowledge that bombs killed hundreds of schoolgirls at their elementary school. If there's anyone who is truly evil that should maybe be removed, it might be Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth. Donald Trump is spending tens of billions of dollars while gas prices rise. At the same time, this is also a game for him, as we'll talk about later, in the way that he and his allies have played the market. As he sees the price of gas rising, something he insisted would come down and cause other prices to fall with it, he claims that Americans shouldn't believe what they are seeing. Trump said the situation affects other countries much more than it affects the United States. He claimed the U.S. has so much oil and gas, much more than it needs. He also said the United States now has Venezuela as a partner and that it is a massive source of oil and gas.
Because you have to keep the straits flowing. With all of that, it affects other countries much more than it does the United States. It doesn't really affect us. We have so much oil. We have tremendous oil and gas, much more than we need. We have Venezuela now as our new partner, great partner. They've worked out so wonderful. We're working with the administration, the president, and it's a massive source of oil, gas, everything. But we're in a very good position, but very unfair to other parts of the world, like China as an example. I mean, we're doing this for the other parts of the world, including countries like China. They get a lot of their oil through the straits. So we're doing this. We have a very good relationship with President Xi in China. I'm going there in a short period of time, and we're protecting the world from what these lunatics are trying to do.
According to Trump, the U.S. is in a very good position and is protecting the world from what he calls lunatics. But at the same time, there are clips circulating online of gas station owners going out every few minutes to change the prices and raise them. Trump claims everything is fine because the country has plenty of oil and makes money from it. Some observers believe that Trump felt the need to get involved with Venezuela so he could argue that fighting Israel's war would be acceptable because of the oil supply there. Of course, that oil cannot simply be taken and transported into the United States easily. It is not just sitting there ready to be loaded and shipped. But Trump needed to make that argument first. Critics say he moved into Venezuela in order to fight Israel's war. According to them, the United States is now involved in multiple wars on behalf of Israel. Americans are furious about it, especially as oil prices continue to rise. That anger is part of the reason Donald Trump is declaring emergency powers. Reports say the Trump administration is preparing to suspend the Jones Act to try to tame rising oil prices. The administration plans to waive the century-old maritime law that requires American ships to transport goods between U.S. ports. The temporary exemption would apply broadly to vessels moving energy, commodities, and fertilizer among U.S. ports. This would allow cheaper foreign tankers to move those goods, including Gulf Coast oil, to refineries on the East Coast and fuel to more populated areas. The White House says it is considering the move in the interest of national defense to ensure energy products and agricultural supplies move freely to U.S. ports. This plan comes as the administration considers several options to deal with the dramatic rise in crude oil and gasoline prices during the conflict with Iran. The administration also announced it would release millions of barrels of crude oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, with other countries coordinating to release hundreds of millions more. Critics point out that when oil and gas prices were rising during Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Republicans blamed President Joe Biden, even though he did not start that war. When Biden released oil from the strategic reserve to lower prices, they said nothing. Now, critics argue that Trump started a war and is weakening the strategic reserve that is meant to protect national security. There is also criticism of the America First message behind Trump's actions. Some argue that American jobs are being put at risk. Trump has often blamed immigrants for job losses, but critics say major technology and AI companies replacing workers is a major factor. Now, by allowing foreign ships to transport goods between U.S. ports, critics say even more American jobs could be lost. At the same time, observers claim that Trump and his allies may be profiting from the volatility in the oil market. Trump has said that when oil prices go up, we make a lot of money. Critics question who "we" refers to, arguing that ordinary Americans do not benefit from higher oil prices. There are also claims that money from Venezuelan oil sales has been directed to accounts connected to Trump. Whether through those deals or through market fluctuations, critics say Trump and his allies may benefit financially while the public faces higher prices. The volatility in oil markets also creates opportunities for those with inside knowledge to profit from price swings. When Trump says the war is over, oil prices drop. When he suggests the conflict could continue, prices rise again. Those who can predict those statements could make huge profits by timing the market. Meanwhile, ordinary people face the consequences. Workers who extract and transport oil face increased danger, especially as tensions rise in the Persian Gulf. Video has circulated showing an Iranian boat filled with explosives striking a U.S.-owned oil tanker. Critics ask how any of this benefits ordinary Americans. Beyond the direct cost of the war, which has already reached billions of dollars, the economic effects are spreading throughout the economy. Energy prices influence nearly every sector. For example, a large portion of global fertilizer trade passes through the Strait of Hormuz. Farmers across the United States are already facing higher fertilizer and diesel costs. Many are also suffering from trade retaliation against American tariffs. Rising costs for agriculture could soon lead to higher food prices for consumers. Despite this reality, Trump recently appeared at an event with a sign behind him that read, "Lower prices." Critics say it shows a disconnect from the experiences of ordinary people who see rising prices every time they fill their gas tanks.
Look, the thing to remember as well, first of all, energy prices cascade through everything in the economy. Here's another angle. Georgia's number one industry is agriculture. I was on the phone this morning with a cotton grower in Georgia. About a third of the international trade in fertilizer goes through the Strait of Hormuz. And we're coming up on the planting season. So farmers in Georgia and across the country are seeing fertilizer prices now going through the roof, diesel prices now going through the roof. Farmers are already getting hammered in the trade war. The rest of the world is retaliating against American farmers for all of Donald Trump's tariffs. And so this spells potentially very tough times in the weeks and months ahead for American agriculture, which is also going to directly impact food prices.
So Donald Trump actually had this sign on the stage today saying lower prices. I mean, does he think that people don't see the signs on their gas pumps of what those prices are?
I think the president appears increasingly to have lost touch with reality. And that is deeply concerning when you have a White House in which he is surrounded by yes men and yes women who cater to his every need.
They argue that it is deeply concerning for the country to have a president who appears out of touch while surrounded by advisors who simply agree with him. According to them, this issue needs to be discussed every day. They also criticize members of Congress who may consider voting to fund the war. Some argue that the Pentagon already has more than enough funding and should not receive additional money for a conflict they believe should never have started. They say the war should not be funded or justified and that it must be openly challenged. Supporters of that view say they will continue speaking out and encouraging others to stay engaged, keep discussing the issue, and refuse to be silenced.